Hi, my name is Cindy Rang with the Fabric Patch in Ephrata, Washington. You can find us at fabricpatch.net. And we are on class number 7 of our Sew Along featuring our O Tannenbaum pattern. The pattern can be found at fabricpatch.net. It's either an immediate download or you can get the printed paper copy. And what we're making today are the mixed 4 patches. My daughter and I have owned and operated a busy quilt shop in Washington State for over 20 years. We have a retreat center, an active YouTube channel, and a large pattern line featuring our creations. My 2 sons work on machines. One daughter-in-law is our videographer and the other is a long-arm quilter. We are a family that love each other, we laugh together, and every once in a while we get some work done. We have a crew that are saints for their efforts at keeping us on track. Thanks for joining us on our wild ride. So the mixed 4 patches are a lot of fun to make, but they're probably the most difficult block that we're making in the entire quilt. And I didn't mention this in the beginning, but if something is causing you a lot of frustration, you can actually swap anything out you want to. You should never have frustration or sadness or anger when you're quilting. So if something is just giving you a lot of grief, just chuck it. So what we did last time were these 4 patches, also known as 2x2s, where we just sewed these squares together. What we're doing this time, if you look up here, tiny little 4 patches in a bigger 4 patch. So that's what we're making. The reason that this is a really nice lesson is that we've talked earlier about a scant 1/4 inch. If you're making a bigger block, it's a little bit easier than making a miniature block, because making a miniature block, if you're off by 1/4 inch for a 2-inch block, that's pretty significant. If you are off 1/4 inch on a 12.5-inch block, you'd be able to make that up pretty easily in the quilt. So that's why the lesson is fairly important in a beginning quilting technique. But again, don't make yourself crazy. This is a hobby, this is a fun thing. And so I'm just going to show you a couple of little tricks when you're doing it. So first of all, you should have all of your pre-cutting done. Cutting is extremely important to make sure that it's very accurate. And then you've got seam allowance, and then you've got pressing. So you have your bigger squares, and you have these tiny little baby squares. So what we're going to do first is we're going to make our 4 patches out of our little baby squares. And we're going to do these the same way that we did last week, where we're just going to take 2 blocks. So just mix up your greens a little bit. It doesn't really matter. But the whole idea with all of these blocks is that you're kind of making this sparkly background. You're creating your own texture with all of these greens. So we're just going to take 2 that are kind of opposite, and we're going to sew a scant 1/4 inch. And then I'm going to do my next 2, whatever 2 I want. It doesn't make any difference. And I'm going to go ahead and do a scant 1/4 inch. And if you remember, a scant 1/4 inch is about a needle's width shy of a 1/4 inch. So we're just making it a little bit smaller, and you'll see why at the end. So I'm just going to keep chain piecing all the way down until I've sewn all of these little squares together in a scant 1/4 inch. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to be right back. Okay, so the first part of my little chain, and again, when you're chain piecing, you might have one of those fun little chain cutters or your scissors. This is the same thing that we did last time. I'm just going to come over, and I am just going to press these all open. And since I'm doing green and green, it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to press them open, because you've got quite a few. The most important thing is, again, when you're pressing, you just want to make sure that that seam is all the way open and that you don't have any leftover fabric in there, which will change the size of your block. The other thing when you're pressing, when you're doing something small, there's always that risk that you're going to burn yourself as you get your fingers all in there. We do have these little thermal finger cots. I don't use them so much anymore just because I'm kind of used to it. I know right where my iron is. And so, and I use the tip of my iron to open up my block so I don't get my fingers in there, partly because I want to keep my fingers out of the way, and also because this cotton is hot, and so I kind of want to stay out of the way. And so, all right, I'm going to finish pressing these later. First I'm going to show you with the ones that I have. So again, you have all of these little 2x2 patches. So then you're just going to pick a couple and just decide how you want them. And what will happen is you're just going to do that exact same thing. So if this is how we want them, you're going to nestle that seam. I'm going to put a little clip there. I'm going to go to the sewing machine, and again, because I have so much fabric in here, quite a bit of bulk, I am going to go ahead and do a scant 1/4 inch on this one, because once I have this sewn together, I'm going to sew them together with these. So I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew a couple of these together. Okay, so I have a couple of them. I'm just going to open this up and show you again. When you've nestled that point, you end up with that perfect point in there. And on the back, we showed you last time that little clipping trick. So if you'd like to do that, I want this to come to the dark. So I'm going to clip this seam, not into there. And then I want this one to go to the dark. So I'm going to clip this one. And then when I press it, it is true that when they're littler, it's just a little bit trickier. Okay, so there's that clipping trick, and again, that's why that is nice and flat. I don't have that big bulky mountain that's in there. Okay, so now on this side, I'm just going to make sure that all of those seams are nice and flat and open. So the reason that we did a scant 1/4 inch on these blocks is because, again, these blocks need to be the same size as my other blocks, because I'm going to end up doing my 4 patch. So I'm just going to look and make sure that these are 2.5, and they are exactly, I have a tiny little bit. Trim off there. Trim off there. And again, I don't know if you can see that. Here's my line of my 2.5. There's my line of my 2.5. Put pressure. Pressure down. Are those 3 inch? No, those are 2.5. All right, so then what will happen? I'll do this one, press that one open, and then I'm going to begin again. After I've pressed to that one and I've done my clipping trick and trimmed that, here's my next 4 patch. Or I'll probably get more of these done so I can mix up my greens quite a bit more. And then I'm just going to do that same thing. I'm going to go ahead and just put sew these 2 together, sew all of these together in pairs, and then I'll end up turning them and sewing together my 4 patch. after I've done that, I think I need to end up with 6. I'm going to end up with 6 blocks that'll look just about like that. All right, that's it. 1 block left, and that's going to be our paper piecing block that we're going to do next week. And then we're going to put it all together, and then lastly we're going to add our bows at the bottom. So see you in a week. Okay, before you go, a couple of things. We were sort of cutting and looking at this, and I noticed that when you get to block number 7, I didn't really tell you what to cut. I talked about the idea that this is what we're going to make and it's going to end up being 4.5, but I didn't give you any pre-cutting. So what I want to tell you is that you're going to need to cut 10 of your tree green squares that are going to be 5.5 inches by 5.5 inches. And then you're going to need to cut 20 background rectangles, because that's what's going to be right here. So whatever color your background is, 20 rectangles that are 3.5 by 5.5. So that is the pre-cutting that's necessary for block number 7. One other thing that I caught a little too late was when you're cutting block number 4 for your flying geese, depending upon what pattern you have, if you got a pattern before I noticed this and made the correction, block number 4 should say that you're going to cut 3 2.5 by 4.5 inch background triangles and 1 2.5 by 4.5 inch tree rectangle. So if we look at this, this is what we're making at block number 4 are these. So if you cut 4 background, you will have a white tip on your tree. So what you need is 3 background rectangles and 1 tree rectangle, and then your 4 gold stars, squares. All right, happy cutting.
Thank you for watching our video. We invite you to leave a comment, hit the like button, or better yet, subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode. You can also visit our Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or Pinterest pages, or find all of those things and our online store at fabricpatch.net.